Welcome to the Bible Forum. I'm Warren Sprouse. I want to talk to you this evening about some political / cultural events, issues, things that are going on in this world. I want to start with former Vice President Joe Biden. I've entitled this one, The Economy Under Biden. A Citigroup poll of 140 fund managers released last week found 62% expect a Biden victory, compared to 70% who expected a Trump victory in the same survey back in December. What does that mean? Well, Biden's proposed policy reversals from Trump, combined with the Democrat-led House and Senate, could impact every corner of the financial markets, from tech, chemical, and the healthcare companies, to stock prices, to oil futures, private equity investments, and the value of the U.S. dollar. Stephen Gallagher, who's U.S. chief economist at Societe Generale, I take it that's in France, tells Axios, quote, "We're looking for higher taxes," noting that a Biden win now looks more and more certain. People don't say things like this in a vacuum, so we look at the context. Since 2016, Trump has lowered taxes for corporations. It has facilitated record stock buybacks and high dividend payments, a boon for stock prices, as the Federal Reserve has kept U.S. interest rates close to zero. Biden's proposed tax hikes on individuals, corporations, and financial markets would be the biggest since Bill Clinton. Not good for business. Now keep in mind, it's the mainstream media that's pushing Biden. And what they're saying, what they're reporting, is slanted. There will be more of these so-called news reports showing Trump's weakness, but I would encourage you not to believe them. In the end, most Americans want to make money. You've seen some of the reports of people who are back to work already. We're talking millions, where the experts were expecting hundreds of thousands. Nothing in the Biden promises are going to do that. He's offering nothing but special interest group panaceas, essentially offering to buy your vote. And most of what he offers either won't happen or won't work. How do we know? Because it hasn't worked yet. In the world of cultural issues, John Stonestreet heads up something called Breakpoint. He was brought into that after the founder died, and I wish I could remember his name, politician. ProphecyNewsWatch.com reported his comments. He says the cultural journey through the sexual revolution went something like this. First, we wanted sex outside of marriage. That required having sex without the threat of babies. Then we wanted babies outside of marriage. And today, even babies without sex. Somewhere along the way, the idea of marriage without children, intentionally became common as well. Even among Christian couples, the idea of not only delaying children, but choosing not to have them at all is, in many circles, not controversial. In previous generations, an intentionally childless marriage would have been unthinkable. Infertility, as so many couples are painfully aware, is tragic. But intentional infertility is considered a choice today. Another assumption that controls our cultural thinking is that we have children in order to fulfill our longings. This shift goes hand in hand with seeing marriage as fundamentally an institution of adult happiness rather than an institution to protect and enable the next generation. When children are thought of in terms of personal fulfillments, how we go about obtaining them becomes less important, or not at all. And so the sexual revolution is punctuated by ethically problematic reproductive technologies and intentionally single-parent households, not to mention same-sex households who want children even after entering into intrinsically sterile sexual unions. After seeking the moral acceptance of sex without marriage or sex without children for so long, we now seek moral acceptance of having children without marriage and now even without sex. But left out of our moral calculations is what happens to children who primarily exist to fulfill adult longings. We will soon know. According to a new report from the U.S. Census Bureau, America has gotten older faster over the last 10 years than at any other time in history. Since 2010, Americans over 65 have become the fastest growing segment of the population. Meanwhile, the number of those under 18 actually shrank between 2010 and 2019. If this continues, then by 2035, senior citizens will outnumber minors in America in a completely unprecedented, top-heavy arrangement with all sorts of social, economic, and political instability. This news comes at a moment when Christians are already wondering what America their children will inherit. And no matter what we do or how we vote or even who is appointed to the Supreme Court, it seems, our culture and country continue to drift in an anti-Christian direction. In response to a recent disappointing opinion from the Supreme Court, Pastor Kevin DeYoung proposed a new culture war strategy. Writing at the Gospel Coalition, DeYoung urged Christians to have more children and disciple them like crazy. As my Tennessee friend might say, it's not rocket surgery. You see, children are a blessing from the Lord. They aren't the means, but they are the ends. They are the signs of living hope, votes of confidence in God's sovereignty, and the most basic and constant opportunity to love others as Christ loves us. Jesus told his disciples, "Let the little children come unto me, and do not forbid them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." Ours is a culture that hinders children instead of welcoming them. That we look to God's blessings as mere lifestyle choices, even as punchlines in wisecracks or mockery, marks that we are a dying culture, and perhaps a dying church. Christians of all people should have no hesitation challenging our culture's bad assumptions about children and welcoming them as blessings. But to do so, tragically, we'll have to start with the household of God. We used to have something in this country called individual rights. Something happened to them along the way. Former Vice President Joe Biden on Wednesday criticized the Supreme Court for upholding Trump's religious liberty protections against the Obama era. Abortion, contraceptive mandate was what he was talking about. And he pledged to overturn those decisions if he was elected president. He released a statement saying he was disappointed in the High Court's decision, which, by a vote of 7-2, upheld a Trump administration 2018 rule that exempted employers with religious and moral objections from the abortion/contraceptive mandate. What's at stake here? What's the issue? Well, the Little Sisters of the Poor, an institute of Catholic nuns who serve the elderly poor, brought a lawsuit against this issue again. They've done this several times to stop having to provide these medical treatments and procedures in their insurance packages. They don't want to pay for this stuff. When does the government have the right to tell private citizens how to spend their money? That's one of their arguments. Joe Biden says healthcare is a right that should not be dependent on race, gender, income, or zip code. Rights are spelled out in our Constitution. I didn't see abortion listed there, did you? Biden says, yet as a result of today's decision, countless women are at risk of losing access to affordable preventative care. The only preventative care is abstinence and/or protection. And after that, all we have is the destruction of a human life form. You've heard a lot in the news about Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter is an organization seeking to establish themselves as a legitimate defender of the U.S. Constitution. They're fighting for their right to free speech and the abolishment of racism. In this sense, they view themselves as an extension of the civil rights movement. However, their demands are radical by anybody's estimation. Radical in that they cannot legislate attitudes and behaviors in other people. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was clearly integrated with articles and amendments of the U.S. Constitution. The Black Lives Matter movement's goals and purposes espouse unconstitutional change. They write things like, we call for an end to the systemic racism that allows this culture of corruption to go unchecked and our lives to be taken. We call for radical, sustainable solutions that affirm the prosperity of black lives throughout America. We demand acknowledgement and accountability for our pain and injustice. We demand divestment in the police force. We demand investment in the health and prosperity of our communities. The Black Lives Matter Founding Manifesto, published in 2016, and then quickly removed from their website, describes the United States as a, quote, corrupt democracy originally built on indigenous genocide and chattel slavery. A system that, quote, continues to thrive on the brutal exploitation of people of color, and that perpetuates, quote, the ugly American traditions of patriarchy, classism, racism, and militarism. In December 2014, a slogan at a Black Lives Matter demonstration organized by Al Sharpton's National Action Network said, "What do we want? Dead cops. When do we want it? Now." Al Sharpton's an ordained minister of the gospel. Did you know that? Antifa has been called a revolutionary, Marxist, anarchist military movement seeking to bring down the United States by means of violence and intimidation. And they want to change our Constitution? A petition was circulated last week at the University of West Texas by Christian students asking, quote, who's been here longer? The University of West Texas, or Christianity? Which has done the most good? Which is the most giving, productive, stable? The petition accused the young conservatives of a pattern of racism, transphobia, and homophobia throughout the 2019 and through the 2020 school year. The object of the group's transphobic remarks revolved around people posting their preferred pronouns, about HIV, and about National Coming Out Day, during which the conservatives suggested people gather at the Fountain Mall to come out as conservative and get stacks. Is this what you think of when you think of universities? Colleges? Well, sadly today the answer was yes. About 50 years ago, college students started sporting all sorts of anti-establishment rhetoric and behavior. It was the war in Vietnam. It was an unjust war. No, it was a war that they were being conscripted to go and fight, and they didn't want to do it. They hadn't been raised like that. In 1968, it was the unequal treatment of female students. In 1970, it was Kent State. When all that was over, it was something else, and then something else. In 2011, it was Occupy Wall Street. In 2013, it was the debt college students had to pay back, specifically at New York University. In 2014, it was the Keystone Pipeline. President Obama eventually vetoed the bill in 2015. In 2015, it was a dean who had not provided enough safe space on campus for students from marginalized backgrounds. A Yale lecturer who objected to the strict guidelines regarding Halloween costumes. Why can't young people dress up in blackface, turbans, or Native American headdresses? It's Halloween. Being obnoxious is what this is about. 2016, Cornell students demonstrated against the possibility of a President Trump. In 2017, Take Back Our Campuses, Resist White Supremacy, and Immigration were themes in demonstrations. What you think of as an educational experience, these young people think of as being heard, making their mark. It's about giving young people something to care about. Liberal professors and others, as Rush says, filling our young people with heads full of mush. Then they go on to run companies and even countries. Now do you understand?